A Study in Magic by Books of Change. Chapter 78. How to Catch a Dark Lord. Harry and his friends sneaked into the room of requirement after Ron and Hermione returned from their meeting with Umbridge. Ginny joined them this time, as she didn't have a date with Michael Corner on this particular night. I told him I was busy today with exams and such. That made him upset. Seriously, are guys supposed to be this clingy? Ginny complained to Hermione as they waited for Sherlock to appear. Harry didn't pay attention to Hermione's reply and cocked an eyebrow at Julia, who smiled wryly and shrugged her shoulders in return. Apparently she, as a girl, didn't get this dating business either. Sherlock eventually showed up on the mirror. Ron and Hermione wasted no time telling him about Umbridge, how she was completely over her head in regards to the magical mobile network, and now was desperate enough to ask them for help. How in the end she threatened to take them to court, though she had no hope to win the case. The only way to get help now is to twist Miss Jack's arm, said Ron with Fillish. I doubt they'll find her, though. Wrong, said Sherlock. Fudge did figure out she was hiding in the States, and tried to bring her back via extradition and later subterfuge. The Americans, of course, were not amused. So she's safe? Asked Hermione. As safe as a naturalized citizen of the U.S. can be in British soil, said Sherlock gravely. That may not mean much if or when she returns to England. What do you mean? Julia shouted furiously, startling everyone. Wasn't the point of marrying her off keeping her out of the country where it's dangerous? Our purpose is destroying Voldemort, said Sherlock sternly. Not marrying off Jacqueline, not making a killing with Zing, and certainly not bankrupting the Ministry of Magic as vindictive as it was. The latter in particular did us little good. Why? Demanded Julia, arms crossed. LV can replace key members of the Ministry of Magic with his Death Eaters while it's in turmoil, said Sherlock. This, more than the accusation of the MMN, would facilitate LV in achieving his preliminary goal of becoming the wizarding world's overlord. I doubt this didn't cross his mind. In fact, that the Flu Network Authority was able to come up with a solution that corrected the MMM's telephony problems in 2 short weeks seems to suggest LV is using the opportunity for all it's worth. For a while, no one spoke. They were so shocked. Never in his wildest dreams did Harry think Lord Voldemort would want the MMN purchase to fail. At least think it was of no consequence to him ultimately. Not for the first time, Harry marveled at the depths of Sherlock's genius and quietly despaired of ever being as good. Then a thought occurred to him. And if he was upset about the way the MMN turned out, said Harry slowly, I would have dreamt about it. Exactly, said Sherlock, nodding once. I assume you didn't have any visions lately. Chances are he anticipated this outcome and prepared for it, all without telling his followers. Of course, why would he care if his followers are put in the penury when it would make them more dependent on him? And why would he care about their financial support when he can get his hands on the ministry's tax revenue? Everyone nodded grimly. Julia took several deep breaths before putting a very forbidding expression. So we need to smooth things over? She asked, her arms still tightly crossed. Before my dad makes the underhanded deal public and throws all the participating Death Eaters in Azkaban? Obviously, said Sherlock, smirking a bit before turning serious. The original plan was to have your Uncle Jeremy acting as the on-site coordinator at the ministry after the purchase. He would have saved the day, as it were, once the majority of the customers transitioned to Zing. I never intended Jacqueline to leave America until the dust settled, but Umbridge's stupidity made things go too fast, too deep, too soon. Julia sighed deeply. Well, I can't blame you for Umbridge. So what happens now? Jacqueline will announce her intention to salvage the mess and partially refund the ministry for goodness sake, said Sherlock. Our hope is that she will be able to do so remotely. Afterwards, Lestrade will reveal Fudge's underhanded deal to Madame Bones. Not ideal, but it'll do. Figures things wouldn't be straightforward, said Ron after Sherlock had joined the meeting, and as they tiptoed back to the Gryffindor Tower, Julia flew back to the Hufflepuff common room through an open window riding her broomstick. No regrets on selling the MMN off, though. It did Miss Jack a load of good. How do you know? Asked Neville. Ben and George are visiting her right now, said Ginny. I don't know if we should thank her husband for this, but they just told us she looked like she actually gained weight. On the other side of the Atlantic, Fred and George were inside a sizable house in the suburbs of USA. At the moment, they were both sitting on wooden stools at a marble-top kitchen island and had just finished telling Ron and Ginny via text that there was a definitely healthy tinge on both Jacqueline Shin's cheeks and they didn't look sunken. After putting their phones away, they stared at their surroundings with great interest. "Didn't think you'd up for a Muggle kitchen, Miss Jack," said Fred as he beamed goofily at the shiny two-door fridge.
"Neither of us knows how to cook magically," said Jacqueline, their host, who was taking out an electric kettle. "You two can poke around if you like."
As soon as she said this, Fred and George eagerly jumped off their stools and started opening cabinet doors. "What is all this?" asked George as he pointed at a cabinet filled top to bottom with tins and boxes of tea, only one of which declared it had English breakfast.
"Tea," said
Jacqueline as she shook her head.
"Robert tried to stock up on tea before I moved in, only he doesn't know what to get, so we got a bit of everything. Americans have funny ideas about tea. The more exotic and ugly flavor, the better, from what I can tell."
"Can we try this one?" asked Fred, holding a box of Rubu's tea aloft.
"If you like,"
said Jacqueline, looking dubious. Soon the kitchen started to smell like a mixture of Grandpa's pipe and cough medicine as Jacqueline poured hot water over tea bags of Rubus.
"So how is the joke shop going?"
Jacqueline asked as she pushed the mugs across the kitchen island. Identical grins spread across Fred and George's face. "Booming!" said Fred happily. "Far better than we hoped for. The orders are coming in droves. Our phones are seriously ringing out of our pockets."
"That's wonderful," said Jacqueline warmly. "I always thought you two had the knack as entrepreneurs."
"Thanks, but couldn't have done it without you, Miss Jack," said George, beaming. "We never would have had the shop up and running this quickly on our own."
"You would have got it eventually, with or without my help," Jacqueline demurred. "Glad I could help, nevertheless. How is your mother taking it?"
"Haven't told her yet, but with the ministry as it is right now, I think she'll be fine about us not working there," said Fred. "In fact, I think she'd even be okay about us leaving Hogwarts early." Jacqueline made a thoughtful noise.
"What about the instant delivery?" she asked. "How is that working for you?"
"Fine," said Fred. "For the most part. I mean, we had a few people complain to us for being late or sending the wrong thing. Usually it's our fault, but sometimes it's not."
"Not?" said Jacqueline. "How?"
"Sometimes students prank each other," George explained. "Pretend the package is from us when it's from them. So the person is expecting one thing, except the egg has something else, and it blows up on them."
"Spoofing," said Jacqueline, nodding grimly. "I expected this to happen. How frequent?"
Pretty often lately," said George thoughtfully. "I can't think of the number off the top of my head. About 5 times this week. What do you think, Fred?" "Sounds about right," said Fred. "It's usually not that hard to figure out who actually sent the package. Zing shows you the real name of the sender, even if you use someone else's phone or register as someone else."
Jacqueline regarded the two pensively. "If I challenged you two to find a way to send a crate of dung bombs to, say, Mr. Filch's phone," she asked slowly, "without anyone including Dumbledore the Visor, do you think you can do it?"
"Sure, just give us a week," said Fred confidently. "I always wanted to try that. Why'd you ask?"
Jacqueline set her teacup aside and clasped her hands. "I want you two to break Zing," she declared.
There was a moment of stunned silence. "Why?" asked Fred, looking aghast.
"To stop people from actually breaking it," Jacqueline replied. "Users are already doing it, as you well know. It's only a matter of time before the problem goes out of hand. I'm willing to pay top dollar for someone who can find ways to exploit Zing faster than anyone else."
"How much?" asked George, then almost fell off his stool when Jacqueline named the figure.
"That's how important I think it is,"
said Jacqueline calmly, while the twins gibbered incoherently.
"I don't have any official requirements yet, and you two will be more like interns at this point, but I recommend getting a newt in defense against the dark arts."
"Did you talk to Mom about this beforehand?" asked Fred, eyes narrowing.
"Maybe," said Jacqueline, briefly looking mischievous before sobering. "One of the reasons why I didn't push the instant delivery service earlier was because I couldn't find a way to authenticate phone users and create trustworthy connections. Even with that, people are finding ways around it. The pranks are harmless enough at the moment, but they can't rule out the possibility you know who may use Zing for something far more sinister, especially now."
The twins nodded. "Why not hire someone like, I don't know, Alastair Moody?" asked George. "I mean, we'd love to do it, but he already knows, you know."
"I've already hired him," said Jacqueline, sounding rueful. "His aura experience really is invaluable, and not many people can think after the thoughts of dark wizards as well as he does. Only sometimes, all the time really, he doesn't know where to stop."
Jacqueline took out her magical mobile phone and clicked the home button. A holograph showed Alistair Moody and Jeremy Shin projecting out from the screen. The holographic Moody was examining a small parcel with his magic eye, and the holographic Jeremy was glaring at Moody with his arms crossed. Boxes upon boxes were heaped in piles all around them. "Looks like a chocolate frog," growled Moody while eyeing the parcel he was holding suspiciously. "But I can't rule out someone putting poison in it. Could have put a sleeping spell in the box and then jinxed the frog to attack the recipient while they're asleep. It'll take me about a week to be sure." Jeremy threw his hands up. "Moody! We actually have to send these parcels at some point, you know!" he roared.
"See what they mean?"
Jacqueline sighed. During the month of June, things were seemingly quiet in the wizarding world. John had a suspicion Magical UK was so tired of embarrassing itself to the wizarding world at large that the citizens did their best to give the appearance that all was back to normal. As planned, Jacqueline fixed the old magical mobile network and partially refunded the Ministry of Magic the galleons she received for its sale. Many members of the ministry, who were on the verge of being made redundant, received the news with great gladness. Lestrade said they even threw a ruckus party for her, they were so grateful, but Jacqueline declined to attend. She rather liked living in America, she wrote in her RSVP, and had no intention of leaving it just now. John later asked her if she was serious, and Jacqueline replied, "Yes, she was, thank you. Oh, by the way, no one tried to send a bomb through Zing just yet." Fudge continued to act as Minister for Magic even after Madame Bones, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, somberly announced that several high-ranking ministry officials, who she left unnamed, were convicted of bribery, embezzlement, and illicit business practices. Arthur assured John and Sherlock that Fudge had been successfully impeached and would leave the minister's office after the Trebizond tournament. So far so good, John thought, until Arthur told him Lucius Malfoy was not among those who were prosecuted for their hand in the MMN purchase, as he was too sensible to squander his own capital on a risky business venture. He was, however, heavily fined for enticing other people to invest in the MMN acquisition in exchange for kickbacks. Dolores Umbridge vanished from the face of the earth. No one seemed to know what happened to her. At least Arthur, Kingsley, and Lestrade didn't know anyone who knew. But Shin, who could hear the thoughts of anyone close by, told Lestrade both Madame Bones and Chief Auror Rufus Scrimgeour were aware of the fact she used the Imperious Curse on Jacqueline and fed Hagrid Veritaserum. Since the former act was illegal enough to earn someone a life sentence in Azkaban, Lestrade speculated the Wizengamot, which reinstated Dumbledore as chief, did something about it. But that was it. The person Sherlock rattled the entire wizarding world to flush out, Lord Voldemort, remained in the shadows and refused to react. It was as though he didn't care all but 5 of his Death Eaters were in prison, and the 2 people who could do something for him, Snape and Lucius Malfoy, had their hands tied because of the MMN scandal. To top it off, Harry reported no visions or strange dreams.
"Not even one?"
asked Sherlock impatiently.
"I did have a funny dream where I walked down a dark corridor that ended at a door," said Harry. "I really wanted the door to open, but it didn't, so I kept staring at the door."
"When did you have it?" asked John.
"The night before Ron got a letter from Percy,"
said Harry, his eyebrows furrowed.
"That's the day before the Daily Prophet wrote that article about Hagrid."
"Did you have the dream again?" asked John.
"No,"
said Harry, shaking his head.
"Just that one time."
Harry, of course, worried himself sick over Elvy's lack of activity. John sensed something else was bothering him, though, because Harry frequently bemoaned that even if Lord Voldemort were doing something, he'd be too blind and stupid to pick up the hint.
"Don't say that," said John sharply. "You're far from blind and stupid. That doesn't mean I'm smart enough," Harry snarled. "I might miss something really important again. Or you might pick up something everyone else missed, like the last time,"
said John, as she wondered if Harry still felt guilty over Winky. Harry pulled a face and said nothing.
"Brains aren't everything, you know,"
John went on.
"Even for detectives. I don't remember what brought it up, but Sherlock and I talked about his deduction and observation skills once. What made him discover it and develop it, that sort of thing." "Mensa Society," said Sherlock. "That's society for people who have high IQ, which I am not a member."
"Oh yeah, right, I asked if you'd join," said John.
"Pointless," Sherlock scoffed. "If raw intelligence, and intelligence alone, accounts for a person's ability to observe and deduce, then every single member of that society would be a good detective. At any rate, my abilities are largely the result of systematic training."
"Though your French grandmother might have contributed some relevant DNA," John retorted. "Anyway, I read a book that said after a certain point,
greater intelligence has diminishing returns, meaning you don't need to be a genius in the popular definition of the word to master something well enough to be brilliant at it. Good old-fashioned hard work and practice can get you there just fine. Can you guess what the book said, how long it generally takes to master something?
Harry gaped a little.
No, how long? 10,000 hours, said John. That's about 10 years. Sherlock's been practicing deduction since he was a 6, meaning he has more than 30,000 hours of practice under his belt. So of course he knows how to be a great detective.
That seemed to assuage Harry of whatever that was upsetting him, because he started to worry about nothing but Voldemort's inactivity afterwards. Messages and calls from Harry dwindled to nothing as his final exams drew near. Even Sherlock, who was untiring and indefatigable when it came to his cases, started to find other things to put his mind on. Then one day in late June, Sherlock had so far relaxed as to go for a walk with John in the park, where the elms were lush with green and the sticky spearheads of the chestnuts were bursting with their fivefold leaves. After leaving Benedict in Mrs. Hudson's hands for 2 hours, they rambled about together, in silence for the most part, as befits two people who know each other intimately. It was nearly 5 before they were back in Baker Street once more. John was expecting the first thing they'd hear was the sound of Benedict's screaming. Instead, John's phone mooed like a cow. John blinked in astonishment, and Sherlock looked just as surprised. But the text that triggered the sound made both Sherlock and John's jaws drop. I admit you were right about the cardio. Severus Snape. What the? Snape! John shouted while Sherlock snatched the phone away. Are you dying? Are you dead? Answer me, damn it! Sherlock replied to the text within seconds. Instead of Snape, they got a text from Albus Dumbledore. I would greatly appreciate if you met me and Junhu at his office in King's College. Albus Dumbledore.